Well, happy Sabbath, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to the Friday night Sabbath Eve Bible study for this 21st day of the fourth month on the God's Holy Sacred Calendar, the Hebrew calendar. And as you can see on the left side of this calendar page from Arthur Spear's comprehensive Hebrew calendar, I've got his book cover up on the page to give him credit for this page that we're showing. And a big thank you to Mr. Joe. I just got back to the broadcast booth here a few minutes ago. I had to make a trip, and thankfully you had provided me these calendars ahead of time, and at the beginning of the week I went ahead and loaded it into our live streaming program, and we were ready to go. I did open up my email just before coming on, and Walter, I'm looking for an email back from you. I see the one you answered me from this morning, and you said your brother does, yes, live in Newfoundland, there where you live, in the country, state, it's a province of Canada where you live. And I have a prayer request from Walter I'll be giving you in just a few moments here in tonight's Bible study, but give you a chance to get tuned in and settled down. And what we're going to be doing tonight is picking up where we left off last Sabbath. During the Sabbath service, we were playing a sermon by Dean Blackwell. I'm sorry, his name slipped my mind just for a moment. And we got halfway through that sermon. It's literally a 2-hour, a little over a 2-hour sermon. So in 1957, we weren't as careful, maybe, or maybe that was an important sermon. The sermon itself took 2 hours, so the rest of the Sabbath service would have been on top of that in San Diego. And I believe it was correct that it was in San Diego. Mr. Blackwell mentioned Chicago. He had been in Chicago before being assigned to preach in San Diego. So Chicago was his own old stomping quarters. I did look up one of the doctors he mentioned, or health advisor people he mentioned that was into health foods and that kind of thing. And I might mention something about that, if not tonight, during the Sabbath service in the morning, because that was a very popular man that he made mention of. Yet he was popular for a couple of reasons. Some people loved him, some people spoke against him. And, as with many things, even the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there is actually good on that tree. And if you can glean the good off of that tree, you do well. I wish maybe somebody would give me a note. I'm seeing an awfully high level on the microphone, and maybe it's just because even when I'm not speaking, I'm seeing a high level, like there's some noise. Oh, I know what it is. Yeah, I was working all day on my laptop that I have a little device underneath it that has 2 fans in it, and those fans are noisy. I just turned them off. Yeah, and that level indicator did go down, so that's probably what it was, and you were probably hearing those loud 2 fans in the background. Okay, we got those cut off. Beside mentioning some prayer requests, having that 1-hour sermon, so we're going to get to it pretty quickly, with Mr. Dean Blackwell, and that's going to work fine for me. Brethren, I'm going to share this with you because I'm doing this for some of you as well as for myself, but I fasted today, and because one of you are fasting tomorrow about something, and I see the criticalness of that, I'm extending my fast into tomorrow. I'm an old hat at doing 3-4 day fast in the past, so that's not a problem for me. I did run out just before going live, and I bought a big, well, not that big, but I bought a good watermelon and stuck it in my refrigerator so that when I break this fast tomorrow night, I'm going to split that watermelon in half, have some nice, juicy, watery watermelon. But I hope by my fasting it encourages you about a couple of you that are having some serious problems at your back, and one of them health, another one living situation, and some of you guys that have a health situation. You recently had a situation similar to one of our sisters in Florida who, and if she wants to tell you in the comments section on Facebook, be watching for her so you can pray for her too. I'm going to leave it at that. But she has the same situation you couple of fellows in California had, where your landlord decided to sell the house he was renting to you. And since he had you on a month-to-month tenancy, all he had to do was give you 30 days notice that, hey, I'm selling the house. You got to move. And unless you want to buy the house at his ridiculous price. And so our sister in Florida facing the same kind of situation. She's fasting about that. And so I'm fasting with you on that. And you fellas in California with the health thing and the epilepsy, I'm fasting with you about that, hoping you can find some good natural resources. But you got to remember now, when you look for healing, that as Christ expounded it, we've been covering that, and that's one of the subjects that'll be part of the sermon that Dean Blackwell is giving, is health and faith. We did several radio broadcasts by Mr. Armstrong. I even have another one yet we can do by Mr. Armstrong on health and faith, and how Mr. Armstrong reminded us that Jesus Christ gave us a condition for healing. That condition is that you have faith. And Mr. Armstrong, because of that teaching by Christ, Mr. Armstrong honoring it, he made a doctrine in the church that, brethren, if you trust God, great. Trust God for your healing. If you trust doctors, if you're putting your faith in doctors for your healing and you trust doctors, he said, you better do everything those doctors tell you to do. It's not one foot in one camp and one foot in the other. It's one way or the other. It's a way. And if you trust God, you got to trust him fully. Now, you got to be wise. If you've started out with some doctor and you want to get away from that doctor, you better let that doctor coach you from getting away from him, because if you cut some things that you've submitted yourself to a doctor on cold turkey, if you cut it cold turkey, they tell you could have a heart attack and some serious things like that. So if you put your life in the hands of a doctor, you better go to him to ask him to help you out. Get out from under his clutches if you're going to. And, whatever he was giving you, that supposedly a cure for this or that, you may suffer this or that again until you get the healing from Christ based on your faith. All right, we're going to go to Mr. Blackwell in a moment to finish up his sermon. But let's see, what we have. Speak of health issues, we have a prayer request from Walter Little in Newfoundland. He's asked me, brethren, to pass along this prayer request on behalf of his brother. And I was just looking, still don't see another reply. I asked Walter if he could send a current picture of himself, and if he has a current picture of his brother, or any picture of his brother that he could send along, that can help, because if you can see a picture of who you're praying for, sometimes it's really, really helpful to you. By the way, I've lifted the calendar up on the screen. You can see it's the 21st of the 4th month. It's the 26th of July, 2024, if I didn't mention that earlier. And I got sidetracked, so I don't think I did. But it's the 26th day of July until midnight. And then on men's calendar, it becomes the 27th at midnight tonight of July, 2024. It's only one day on God's calendar. Hooray for when Jesus Christ returns and we no longer will be having to suffer transposing the calendar of the future, the Hebrew calendar, over to what man uses today as the civil calendar, almost around the whole world, who has adopted the Roman Gregorian calendar. Originally was the Roman Julian calendar after Julius Caesar of the Roman Empire. when they had to whack 10 days out of the calendar because it got out of orbit. That was done under Pope Gregory, so Pope Gregory after that stuck his name on the new calendar, on the one with 10 days out of it. They said, well, this is how we'll distinguish it. We'll put the name of a pope on the calendar. And that's fitting because the Roman Empire had an imperial form of government where they had the pope selecting the emperor and holding the coronation ceremony and crowning him. So it is an imperial form of government, and it's prophesied in the Bible for a restoration, a revival, a restoration for its seventh dynasty, its seventh kingship, its seventh and final time. Hooray, hooray. And in duality, its next time will be another ascension of the beast who was mortally wounded but not killed, had a deadly wound but didn't die from it, and has been long in the abyss, healing and being made ready as Europe anticipates and awaits and watches for their new emperor to come forward. And they're making ready for it. They're making for a strong political union, a strong economic union. They now have their euro, their own money that gives them their economic union, and a strong military union, which they're building as they take opposition to things, Russia and Ukraine and the United States Yankee dollar and it being the reserve currency and the petrodollar. Europe doesn't like that. And the new president, who was the old president, she was reelected, Ursula von der Leyen. As she gave her acceptance speech, what did she say mostly? She said to almost every question that was asked her during confirmation hearing time, she responded with, "We need a strong EU, a strong Europe." And when the question was posed before President Biden gave his announcement that he would not be rerunning, when the question was posed that as of November we might have a president-elect who will be proffering a less friendly White House. And she was asked, what did she think about that? And she said, well, we need a strong EU, a strong Europe. To every question she was saying, strong Europe, strong Europe. The new Prime Minister of the UK chimed in. The UK Prime Minister of Britain chimed in following Netanyahu's very well-received speech by Congress, by those who attended anyway, with just one or two few exceptions. That one Muslim attendee holding up a war criminal sign. But has she fit the category, did she not, that Mr. Netanyahu spoke so well of the protesters outside who were the fools of Iran? They've been bought off by Iran. Foolish. And some of those people have, as their part of their tendency is to be gay and lesbian and things like that. Things that Muslim, Islamic religion of those who call themselves Muslims. Muslim simply means those who adopt Islam as their religion. Muslim itself is not a religion, but a Muslim is like a Catholic. They've adopted the Roman Catholic religion. The Catholics have. The Muslims have adopted the Islamic religion and its so-called holy book, the Quran, which claims that Christ is only denigrated to a prophet and claims that God told Abraham to take Ishmael up to the mountain to offer him as a sacrifice instead of Isaac. So you got some things that are not quite according to Hoyle, not up to par, not up to the tree of life, a valid, provable truth Why do I put it like that? Because the Bible offers its own proof of its truth. And if you can break it, the proofs that the Bible gives, then you prove it untrue. But you can't do it. You can't break it. In fact, just the opposite. You prove true the Bible because of the proofs in the Bible. Not so with other books. Okay, let's get on with the request for prayer, and then we'll go to Mr. Blackwell. Let him finish up. Walter Little asked for prayers for his brother who, Walter tells me, had a work-related medical done, and they found when they did a medical inspection or, body inspection, health inspection, they found the beginnings of mass in one of his lungs. So I guess that mass, would that be some form of a lung cancer? A mass in the lung. And Walter asked me, would I pray for him and ask our listeners here on the live stream for the Bible study and the Sabbath service to pray for Walter's brother as well. Walter did not mention his brother's name, and Walter did respond back to me that yes, his brother lives in Newfoundland, as does Walter. But it'd be the brother of Walter Little. Walter's last name is Little. Walter actually is a big guy. I wanted to show you his picture so you could contrast his name to his strength. He's a construction worker, big, strong construction worker. But he's got a humble name, Walter Little. And his brother has a mass, some form of mass in, I think it must be one of the lungs. And let's see, could you pray for him? He had a work-related medical inspection done, and they found the beginnings of a mass in one of his lungs. Yeah, Walter does distinguish that as being in one of his lungs. So let's do that, brethren. Let's pray for Walter Little's brother. Please make a note of that, and just put down Walter Little's brother, and maybe I'll hear back from Walter a little later and have Walter's brother's first name for you as well, maybe even a picture. Okay, but I'm rechecking my email even right now. I don't see anything else from Walter. I'm going to recycle this just one more time, just in case. And let's see. Okay, and they usually come in at the end of my... I'm going to check it just one other way, just in case it snuck off somewhere else. Let's see, I see the one reply. You said, yeah, he's in Newfoundland there with you, Walter. And, okay, here's one other place. Nope, no new email there. And yet, here's one more. Happy Sabbath. Here in Newfoundland, the sun has gone down, and it's now the Sabbath. All right, I've got this one from Walter that just coming in late here. The sun is just now going down here in the central time zone where I am. Walter says, looking forward to tonight's Bible study and tomorrow's Sabbath service. Thank you, Walter. It literally is the best part of my week, no matter what the week threw at me, or no matter what the week threw at me, or the chaos going on in the world. It's a very pleasant and reassuring thought to know God is in charge. Yes, Walter, yes. And we should always put our faith in Him. Enjoy the Sabbath. Kind regards, Walter. Thank you for that, Walter. And I see one more. Okay, but I don't see a picture, and I don't see Walter's brother's name yet. But we'll have that, I'm sure, by in the morning. And then the two fellows in California, whose last name is like a holster you wear if you were carrying a gun belt, but leave off the ER, as Dane Holst will tell you, Holst, Dane Holst, and his son Jacob. They, I know, will appreciate your prayers for God healing Jacob of the epileptic seizures and the brain shortage that opens him up to the epilepsy. So would appreciate your prayers for him as well. And our Bible study tonight, we've given you the date. I left the calendar up here on the screen for a long, long time. We've given you the date for the Sabbath. It's the 21st day of the 4th month, and it is the 26th day of July, 2024. Now, we've gone over when the holy days, when the Feast of Tabernacles will be coming up. That'll be October 3rd this year, 2024. That's a little more than 2 months away. And, brother, by the way, I did get a new device so that when my touchpad hangs up, I've got a new wireless mouse that it sometimes hangs up, but it tends to work. And I'll be able to get my computer to the repairman right after the 1st of August. And in the meantime, though, I've got a way to make things work. Now, I want to put up on the screen, I just want to have on the Bible display, I want to have that ready so that while Mr. Blackwell is speaking, if I can keep up with him, I'll be punching up some scriptures that he might mention for you, brethren. And let me see if our Bible display is working. Yes, it is. Here's a good old standard scripture Mr. Armstrong would preach and encourage us to want to be accounted worthy to escape. He said that should be our number 2 spiritual goal. And I want to ask you as a little quiz, and I'll answer it after Mr. Blackwell speaks. What did Mr. Armstrong say should be our number 1 spiritual goal? Both goals are in this one verse that's on your screen right now. They're right at the end of that verse. Goal number 2, second to goal 1, is to be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, commencing with the 5th seal, Great Tribulation, which will last for a period of 3.5 years, and so does the place of nourishment last for a time and times and half a time, or 3.5 years. But brethren, tonight we're focusing in on faith and healing, or health and healing, as Mr. Blackwell entitled his sermon from 1957 that he gave in San Diego. And we'll talk about tomorrow some of the health advisor people he mentioned in the sermon from last week. And I'll tell you some things I found online, some good and some interesting things about those health advisor people. But let's go now to Mr. Dean Blackwell. He's just going to pick up right where he left off. If you want to hear what he gave at the beginning of this sermon, you can go to our website at cogtv.org. You can get to that by typing sabbath.tv. You go to the menu selection called Archive Video, and then look for either the Bible study last Friday night by its date. That would have been 7 days ago, so that would have been the 19th. Let's see, 7 from 26, is that 19? I think that's right. No, wait a minute. 7? Yeah, that's right. Would have been the 19th. And for the first part of the sermon, and then the second part of the sermon he gave on the Sabbath. We played it on the Sabbath on July 20. So if you look for those 2 dates, you can hear the first part of Mr. Blackwell's sermon. We're going to pick up. We have just enough time for me to come back for a few minutes after his sermon. Mr. Blackwell speaks for 1 hour for the rest of the sermon. Oh, actually, no, 45 minutes. So we'll have a few minutes when he finishes. So let's go to him. Dean Blackwell finishing up his sermon now on health and healing. Brethren, give him good ear. He's going to explain a lot of things he brought up in the earlier part of his sermon. He'll make clear where he's coming from. Health and healing. Dean Blackwell.
To the top of your head. Yes, and people wrote in when Mr. Wolverton drew those pictures in the Plain Truth and said, well, what kind of a horrible God is that? What do you print that stuff for? We don't want to see that.
Brother, I'm going to back up, Mr. Blackwell, just by maybe about a minute or so, so that it's kind of so you can kind of mentally cue into where he left off last week.
We had didn't do any good. They admit that in this article. This is some new type disease that we can't heal, in other words. But our serums don't do any good. This is a new disease that we can't heal. You want to face God as your healer now, or you want to put it off and when you're going to have to? It's a lot easier to do it willingly than to be kicked and shoved a little bit into it. God's going to plead with all flesh. That means He's going to just give you a little correction and kind of guide you along with a little whipping here and there for your own good to see that you get in the right place. See, it's easier to do it willingly. It's a lot easier to walk than to be dragged. God's going to drag you for your own good until you finally break the rope by too much holding back. Then hell's right behind you if you do that. The eternal shall smite you, verse 35. In the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed, from the sole of your foot to the top of your head. Yes, some people wrote in when Mr. Wolverton drew those pictures in the plain truth and said, well, what kind of a horrible God is that? What do you print that stuff for? We don't want to see that. You want to see it in a picture, or you want to see it literally? You want to see it in the Plain Truth magazine, or you want to see it on your Aunt Bessie, on some of your relatives? Which way do you want to see it? You're bound to see it. You're going to see it in the next few months, in the next few years. I'm going to read a few more things of this position, and we'll turn. Now here he mentions in this new method of healing people that he practiced, he avoided the danger of causing a medicinal irritation of the bowels, which it's sometimes difficult to avoid, which he'd been doing in other medicines. He knew he caused an irritation of the bowels trying to help you with another disease. Now he said he was going to avoid that. Now he says, I've never seen these large doses of quinine do any good in typhoid fevers. You know, we said the burning ague, as you read here in Deuteronomy 28, with the burning fevers. Yes, scarlet fever, rheumatic fever, typhoid fever, yellow fever. They're right in our door path. I've never seen these doses of quinine they're giving you do any good in typhoid fevers. And as the use of cathartics, from my observation, I soon became satisfied that a vast number of lives have been lost by their use in cases of remittent and typhoid fevers. The tendency to irritation of the mucous membrane, which exists especially in the latter disease, being often fatally aggravated by cathartic remedies. Now, he admitted right here that he's seen people actually killed from the use of these medicines instead of done any good. Well, he's going to have some lives on his hands, too, that he's going to be responsible for. He's taken people's lives into his hands. He's done as Asa and a lot of these kings in the Bible. And about the first 6 chapters of 2 Kings, all you read of is healing. The whole 5 or 6 chapters you read. Now, this king, in his sickness, sought to the physicians instead of the doctors. He fell through the lattice and was sick. He didn't come down off his bed, but he died. Why? Because he sought the physicians. Way back then they had physicians. They're not what Luke and Christ were. These men back then were sorcerers. They tried by enchantments, by certain little charms, by so many rabbit foots to keep a man from being sick or dying. Yes, and you read so many of those kings in those days, they sought to the physician. They sought to the god of Baal or these other gods for sorcery, and they died in their sickness. Now here is a very, very important statement. The teacher of the class where he was taking classes in pre-med and medical school, here, gentlemen, is a case of disease which, like the smallpox, measles, and scarlet fever, runs a definite course. If you will let the patients alone, they'll generally get well. But if you commence dosing them, you will often bring on complications and they will die. This statement, coming from a medical man of his prominence, surely was worthy of consideration. That's the teacher of the medical college. And that's the same. Now, you know, in every case, everything we've read so far shows there's three types of healing. One, there's a natural healing that your body does itself. This physician we read of here in New Orleans, he said, we only try to help nature. We help from the outside by a hot water bottle at the feet to speed up circulation, by rubbing and massaging with a towel to keep up circulation. We help in that way by the wine that they pour in to speed up circulation. We help the natural powers. We help the natural powers do the healing. Well, you know, when a man goes on a diet, as we read in this Dr. McCoy, and he takes orange juice and water only for so many days, and he's completely healed of deafness. God didn't heal that man. He might have been a Baptist or a Methodist or an atheist, agnostic. He might have been a Chinaman. But he went on a diet. He purged out the poison that he'd put in his body. He could hear again. And that's that nature healing again. That's the natural healing powers in the body that God put there. And you glorify God in that too. You don't glorify any man because he tells you what you've eaten wrong and tells you to avoid it. God put that natural healing in your body. And like this original physician said, we just help by the outside nature to rid the body of the poison. That's all you do, and that's all you can do. There's one thing no one has ever said they could do, not Dr. Hoxie, not anyone else, but these so-called divine healers. And that's forgive the sin. That's to forgive the sin and the damage that the poison did while it was in there. You can take the poison out by yourself, that's true. The more poison you take out of yourself, the less suffering you'll go through. The less number of diseases you'll have. Yeah, that you can do. But to heal yourself, you don't have the power. Neither does anyone else. Now, as he mentioned right here even, with diseases like smallpox, measles, scarlet fever, depending on how much poison in your body, depends on how severe they are. The less poison you have, the lighter case you're going to have. But if you just leave your body alone, it'll run the course. But does that mean if you have scarlet fever, if you have the measles, you shouldn't call for a minister? No. No one does. Because when God heals, he puts the penalty right there. But if you go on and allow the penalty to go right on through your body, then you paid the penalty. You're not healed. If you let your body throw off that poison completely, you're not healed at all. You paid the penalty. When you commit a sin, if you eat pork, that isn't an eternal sin. God doesn't say, now, that's going to take your life forever. He says that's going to cause you to suffer so long, and when you've paid that penalty, when you've gone through that time of penalty payment, then you're well. But that isn't divine healing. You can come with the measles. Now, let's take the measles just for an example. If you have the measles, there are three things you can do. You can just leave them alone completely and do nothing. Now, very few people ever die of the measles. Your body will throw it off after a while, after maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. After your body pays the full penalty, you're rid of the measles. That's one thing you can do. Second, you're rid of the measles. That's one thing you can do. Secondly, you can go on a diet and start drinking water and liquids, start flushing some of that poison out of you, and the penalty will be cut down quite a bit. You may only go a week or 5 days. Thirdly, you can call on God and ask God. And maybe in a day or two it'll be gone. Maybe immediately. But you'll never pay the full penalty when you do that. You never will, because that's divine healing. So you have divine healing, you have natural healing. They're not the same at all. You have divine healing, you have natural healing, and you have fasting to help rid yourself of the poison. Now that's three distinct things. You don't ever get them mixed up. Because if you just start fasting, you're not in God's hands. And you know a person can have a cold and they'll say, oh, well, my body will throw that off after a while. Well, a month from now you get another cold. It takes a little longer to throw that one off. Another month you get another one. It takes a little longer to throw that off. Finally, your body isn't strong enough to throw it off anymore. So the cold throws you off, takes you out in death. Now that's true. The more you allow your body to pay the penalty, the shorter your life gets. The weaker your body becomes. The weaker the organs of your body are. But if you come and have God heal it and take it away right there, you're just adding years to your life. Then if you just jump immediately and fast, you're going to even add a few more years. We need to know the difference in these healings. Yes, even the doctor admits that if you leave smallpox, measles, scarlet fever, and those types of disease alone, they'll run their course. In other words, your body will pay the penalty. When the penalty's paid, it'll end. Now here he mentions another thing. The type of remedies he used, when properly used, don't have the same effects as the regular medicines. Now get this, what regular medicines do to your body. They do not benumb, in other words, deaden part of your organs. Deaden your liver and make it less active. They do not benumb, nor do they seriously aggravate existing disease action. They neither cause disease action in well organs. Now that's one of the very prime methods of healing today. They take a well organ, inject a germ in it, inject the germ into one of your well organs of your body. And it stirs up that much more resistance in your body. Well, they reason then that if they do that, then that'll help the disease that was already there. Of course, when you get over it, when you get well, you've got two organs that are a lot weaker instead of just one. In other words, by trying to get a shortcut, by trying to get around paying the penalty, you pay the penalty twice. You pay it twice. Now you remember the same thing is implied on Babylon in Revelation. Render to her double. Double unto her. On Babylon. Because she put these things on people herself. Because she was trying to get people into the kingdom in a shortcut, in another way. She says, oh, well, you don't have to spend your whole life. As soon as you die, you have an immortal soul. Or you don't have to wait till the time of the millennium to meet Christ. As soon as you die, you can. They try to get us to think we're going to ascend up into heaven like Satan thought. Now here he mentions this silver that they put in little babies' eyes. Nitrate of silver and acetate of zinc, which applied to well eyes will cause irritation and inflammation. And he admits they'll do that. But now, if you take the same nitrate of silver and acetate, since they make your eyes bloodshot if they're not already, since they irritate them if they're not already irritated, then if your eyes are already irritated, it'll heal them. Now that's what he says. I'll read it in his words. Nitrate of silver and acetate of zinc, which applied to well eyes will cause irritation and inflammation, are often applied to inflamed eyes. They sometimes seriously and even dangerously aggravate the disease so that the vital forces do not react and thus affect the cure. Now here's another mention he makes about the method of healing that he used and shows by contrast the natural healings of the medicines and drugs of doctors. The great beauty and excellence of this system consists in the ability to treat patients successfully thereby without making well organs sick, or aggravating existing disease action, or creating an opposite disease state, as you do when you give a cathartic remedy in a cathartic dose for constipation. In that case, the reaction, if reaction follows, is not in the right direction. Consequently, the constipation is often aggravated. I have hardly, now in other words here you say, well, I'm constipated. I'll have to get something to force that through. So you take a laxative. Well, what if it isn't powerful enough to force it through? And you know, there's something there blocking it off. Isn't it rather sensible and even sound for a little kid to say, well, now let's see, there's something blocking it. Let's get whatever that is blocking it out of the way, and then it'll pass right on through. Well, we had a lady in the church in St. Louis. She had this very same trouble with constipation. Well, she had milk with magnesium. That makes your bowels act. But her bowels wouldn't act, so she was going to make them act. Yes, they acted all right. But they didn't know at the time that she had a tumor blocking it. Blocking the passage, a physical protrusion there, a tumor blocking it. So her bowels acted all right. They couldn't act downward, so they acted upward. So she started bloating and bloating and bloating. Now, if they hadn't cut into her right away, she would have just burst and died right there. Burst wide open and all of her insides just falling right out all over the floor. Because they said, well, let's see, there's something blocking your bowels action. Let's put something in there to make your bowels act. You can do it. You can make them act all right. So what if you can? They're going to act, bloat you up, and burst you. I have hardly ever seen, excepting in cases of mechanical obstruction, now notice, I have hardly ever seen, except by mechanical, by a tumor or a protrusion there, by a mechanical obstruction, a severe and troublesome case of constipation that had not been caused by the use of these laxative remedies. Now, this is coming from a medical doctor. This isn't coming from the little head I've got or the little brain I've got as far as medicines. So if we give an opiate or an astringent for diarrhea, we can see that it is a direct effort to restrain the disease by force, as it were. And we necessarily have to give large doses. And if the vital forces react against this medical intrusion, the reaction is not in the direction of health. And that's as strong as he can say it. I can say it a lot stronger than that. It is true that the vital forces sometimes overcome the diseased action in spite of the medicinal action. Sometimes your body throws it off in spite of that rotten poison you injected in there. Sometimes your body is strong enough that it'll throw it off in spite of what you did to it. Not for it. But it does not always do this. And subacute and chronic diarrheas are the result of the use of such remedies in some cases to create disease of a well organ for the sake of curing disease in another organ, as is done. And when cathartics are given for diseases of the head or lungs, everyone can see is a roundabout treatment. And while patients may sometimes be benefited by this calling off, as it were, you call off the attention of the vital defense of your body from the disease action in one organ and bring it over to a weaker or to a less important organ. So if your heart's affected, get it down on your kidneys. That isn't quite as important as your heart anyway. Now that's healing. That's the kind of healing you want. That's the kind the doctors use. Still, it is not a very satisfactory treatment as a whole. I'd say it's a rotten, abominable, damnable crime. For you may lessen the vital power of resistance against diseased action. Now, he has a lot more in here I could read. I don't want to take the whole time just reading here. One more. In typhoid fever, there is a tendency to irritation of the mucous membrane of the small intestines. And as I have already stated, I am satisfied from observation that when cathartics are given during this disease, this irritation is often most seriously aggravated, and death not unfrequently follows as a result. He's seen people die. He knows they've died because it's a gamble. They inject the poison into your body, gambling, that it'll excite your body just that much more. But if your body just is at the ebb, it's using all of its power as it is, and you inject another poison, that's just certain death. It's just the same as this polio vaccine. You know what happened from this dose they had here in San Francisco? They got some live germ instead of dead from the insides of the monkey, which is an unclean animal. If you want to eat monkey, or if you want to eat snake or turtle, if you want to eat pig, it's the same as taking that out of his kidney. Taking a monkey and killing him and taking this liquid out of his kidneys and putting it in you. Now, what if they inject a live germ instead of a dead one? Well, if they inject live when they're giving you polio instead of taking it away from you, which they did, did you hear any heads fall? Did you hear about anybody being held accountable for that? Do you know of anybody that was fired and lost their job and kicked out? Didn't hear a thing, did you? They reprimanded them. Oh, yes, but how many people died? Well, our own ways are just eating us up. One of these days we're going to learn that God means what He says. You're going to read how many times you read in the Bible. Now let me put this plain as I can put it. When you read in the Bible that Asa sought to the physician, if you go down to the doctor and he recommends medicine, you're doing the same thing exactly. And don't fool yourself. Don't say, oh, well, that's a different kind of doctor today. Don't fool yourself. Say, oh, well, this is natural medicine here. You know, that's like saying an immortal soul, a natural medicine. The two words just exactly contradict each other. There's no such thing as a natural medicine. There's no such words. Now, in the first place, the word physician in the Bible means natural. It comes from the word physics. Now, you look up in any high school book, in a physics book and a chemistry book, and see the difference between the two. Physics is a natural science. Chemistry isn't. Physics is the study of things as they are. Studying things as God put them here, and what makes such and such do such and such. Studying the laws of gravity, studying this. What's chemistry? Well, chemistry is taking a little bit of this and mixing a little bit of this in with it, and splitting up this and splitting up the atom and seeing how you can divide it. Well, let's see, God put the P here this way. Let's split it up and do this to it and that to it. That's what chemistry is. That's what sorcery is. And when you read here in Revelation 22, verse 15 of Revelation 22, speaking of the kingdom of God, speaking of this new Jerusalem where there are no tears, there's no death, there's no sorrow, no grief. For without, outside the kingdom, left behind, burned up in this rotten world when it burns, outside of the kingdom, burned up in the earth that's already passed, were dogs. Now that doesn't mean the puppies, but that means sodomites, sexual perverts, dogs, sorcerers, physicians, chemists, druggists, pharmacists. Put any word you want in there, they're all the same word. Well, outside the kingdom, having been done away with in this temporary world, are all sexual perversions, all medical practices, whoremongers, murderers, idolaters, and whosoever loves and makes a lie. Now notice all these people stem from a liar. They come from their liar. Satan's the father of the lie. You know, Christ told the Pharisees, why, you're of your father the devil. He's the father of the lie. You're liars because you're his children. Well, here's another group of people that love and make a lie. If there's ever been anyone that loves and makes a lie, I'll guarantee you, sorcerers, doctors, physicians, pharmacists, they're all in this. Now, they're in it in ignorance. We don't mean the men that are in those offices are going to die. We mean they're going to have a mighty rough time, like a camel going through the eye of a needle to get into the kingdom. They're going to have to throw off all that rotten things they built up in their head and cleanse their minds from it. There's not going to be any of them in the kingdom. There's not going to be any sexual perversion there. There's not going to be any idolaters either, or whoremongers, murderers. They're all classed together. You remember, the next time you go to a doctor, next time you go to a physician, you let him prescribe medicines and drugs and all these things, don't forget, the same as if you were going to murderers, idolaters, whoremongers, sexual perverts. They're all classed together. I don't mean by this that it's wrong ever to go to a doctor and see what's wrong with you. But I do say if he has to take an x-ray to see, which makes $5 or $10 more in his pocket, so they usually tell you he has to, if he's going to x-ray, you better just go on back and leave him alone. If you want to see a doctor so he can tell you what's the matter with you, that's all right. Anything other than that, I'd say no. And God would say no. And one day you're going to be answerable. Now you look up how many times the word sorcerer is used here. It's in Revelation 21, it's in Revelation 17, Revelation 18, verse 23, Revelation 18. Here's the whole chapter about Babylon. The whole chapter about Babylon. Verse 23, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in you. No, there won't be any more selling of candles. Go down and light for the dead people or anyone else. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in you. They're the only ones that can marry, and if you've been married 6 times, if you weren't married by a priest, you just weren't married. Oh, yes, they believe in divorce and remarriage. They believe that you're not to break that law. They believe that's a command. The whole thing is, if you've been married 6 times, unless you were married by a priest, you've never been married. Now, that's the way they believe in it. Well, here's their picture right here. There won't be any more of their lighting candles and no more of their performing weddings in that church. Your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorceries all nations have been deceived. By your loving lies, by their damnable sorceries, all nations have been deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets, saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth. You know, that is quite inclusive, isn't it? Notice he doesn't say you just martyred the saints, does he? Did he say you just killed some of God's people? What did he say? In her was found the blood of prophets. Yes, they killed the prophets. And of saints. Yes, they killed the saints. And of all that were slain upon the earth. You mean even someone like Abel? Some of these people since then that these doctors have killed. Now you'd be surprised. One of the women in the church in Pasadena, when she was having a baby, they gave her anesthetic to put her to sleep. Now this has been quite a few years ago. They gave her anesthetic to put her to sleep. Well, when she woke up, she looked up and there was a great big light over her. She didn't know what was going on. There was just a great big light, just like a boxing rink or something. Well, she looked up and she started to look around, and there was just a whole great big audience down there. There she was, right there on a table, on a physician's table in the nude. There's a whole bunch of medical students in a little cage type deal. They were there in a class. He was teaching them about childbirth and about the different things there. There she was, a guinea pig being used. This doctor was there just lecturing away to all the people up there and all these students. They were just sitting around and he was lecturing away. She started to get up and started to say, well, what's going on here? And they just whopped her again with another needle. And this time when she woke up, she was back in her room. Well, the husband started to take out a lawsuit. But even his lawyer wouldn't take the case. He said, why, you couldn't do that against the American Medical Association. He said, if you try that, she'll never get out of the hospital alive. They'll kill her before she's found. And if anybody else in that hospital tries to testify, they'd kill them too. And you think that is? Well, what do you look for? For entertainment and the joy of life, the amusement. The recreations, or recreations, that's where the word comes from. They do very little recreating in the movies, you see. They don't recreate any happy atmosphere or happy spirit about you. We can say, here's your entertainment gods right here. We have this nation fairly well summarized as God does. Here are gods. Now, you know a lot of us, and I'll guarantee you this, if you were in doubt, when I started with the sermon, when I read from a Bible about glorifying physicians, when I asked you the question about the shots for polio vaccine, you said, well, that's right, I sure agree, boy. I'm getting tired of some of these fanatical members here that say, boy, just strict natural foods, and that's all. No pills, no junk, no doctors and medicines, none of that at all. I'm tired of those people. Boy, I think it's all right to go to a doctor, and some of these things you've got to distinguish what's a medicine and which isn't. I don't think it's wrong to take aspirin or black draught or penicillin and this and that. And if you were in that class, I'll guarantee you right now, you're on your way out. You're on your way into plagues and diseases whereof you won't be healed. You're on your way into plagues that God says are going to come in the next few months. You're going to go to a physician. He's going to say, well, this is some some new disease. We can't help you. If you go to Dr. Hoxie, he's going to say, well, we don't have any chemical to balance that one in there. I don't know what that is down in your body there now. We don't have anything to neutralize it with. If you're trusting in diets, it's not going to heal you either. Remember, God's the one that heals us. But by His stripes we're healed. He says, if any sick, call for the elders of the church. Let them be anointed and prayed for, and the prayer of faith will save the sick. Now, finally, in conclusion, I want to turn to one verse. You hear so many people talking about, but Luke was a physician. Well, that's a rotten lie. The way the person meant it. They meant, well, now, look, you can't tell me doctor's wrong, because Luke was a doctor. Luke was not a doctor either. Luke had nothing to do with chemistry whatsoever. Nothing at all. Christ was a great physician, so whatever Luke was in, Christ was in. They were both physicians, and Christ was the greatest physician. So whatever Luke used, Christ used even in a greater way, because he was the great physician. Now, Luke didn't forsake his occupation of a physician when he came in as a disciple, because he wasn't a doctor, because he was not a surgeon. Oh, but your doctor will say, well, now, wait a minute, you're just a fanatic. Why, don't you know even where the first operation was, the first anesthetic was used way back there in Genesis? Haven't you ever read that? It says, and God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam. Well, what's the matter with you? I've had a medical doctor tell me that about having babies. What's the matter with you? Don't you know that God used it himself? Why, he put anesthetic into Eve there, and Adam. He caused Adam to go into a deep sleep. Well, that's somebody that loves a lie, isn't it? That's somebody that's going to defend himself no matter what happens. Even if he has to lie about it, he's going to defend himself. Even if he has to lie in front of a court with his hand on God's word swearing, oh, no, they didn't have that woman in there using her as a guinea pig. Oh, no, sir. No, they didn't do that. They're going to lie, and anybody that won't lie, they'll kill them. Yes, it's a good old world, isn't it? You know, a lot of times we think, well, we can get a little bit of this world without getting the rest of it. You know, there's no middle road. You take all the world as it is, or you take all of God as it is. And there's where we go astray. And a lot of us, we think, well, I'm not fully persuaded. Now, I think it might work out having two wives. Really, I think I might be able to work that. But you don't understand. If you try to get along with just the two wives, you've got to lose God as your healer. You're going to lose the Sabbath day. You can't take just one thing out of the world and the rest of the things out of God's. If you choose one thing that you refuse to give up in the world, you have to take this rotten medical profession with it. You have to take all of them as your physicians. You have to take the entertainments of the world. You have to take the whole world right along with it. All of its rottenness, all of the thievery, all of the larceny and the rape and the murder, you have to take that right along with it. You're going to take the bitter with that little pill that you think's the sweet. Yes, Christ was a physician, but he wasn't a doctor. Luke was a physician. Let's see how he exercised that job. Verse 30 of Luke 10. Now, you know, this is rather interesting, that this is the only book of the Gospels that this parable is mentioned in. Now, why did this man that was a physician, this parable stuck in his mind, it just went right over the heads of Matthew, Mark, and John, but it stood in the mind of Luke, and he wrote it down. It was really important to him, because he was a physician. Let's read about it. Verse 30, Luke 10, and Jesus answering said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, modern Baptist minister maybe. It applies today. These scriptures aren't out of date. These weren't just talking about back then. Here comes one of our ministers today by, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Well, that isn't my job. That's for the doctor. That's the physician's job. I can't do that. So he passed by on the other side. Well, likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him. So at least he came over and looked, and then he went by on the other side. Now, that wasn't his job either. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, now here's the Gentile, a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. When he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him. Now here's the parable. And Christ doesn't use anything in a parable that he wouldn't apply literally. All right, what's going to happen if you ever get beat up, or if you ever have cuts on your flesh? You're going to drop that little bit of iodine in there and pickle your skin? Go ahead if you want a big scar on there. Go ahead if you want to pickle your skin. You think it doesn't do it? I guarantee you it does. And every time a boxer gets a scar on him, another boxer aims right for that scar every time he hits. So all I've got to do is hit right on that scar enough and it'll break again. That's right, because your skin's dead there. You've got two dead pieces of flesh clinging together slightly. Well, some of us are prejudiced, so we'd say, oh, we don't want Christ living this in our life. Now, part of the things Christ did, we'll let him live in us. But boy, when he did this, we wouldn't let him do that in us. And he went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and fermented grape juice or wine, and set him on his beast, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. Every single word there you can apply, you can use. Man lives by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Now, I've been surprised. People have been startled in the churches that have used oil and wine on sores instead of iodine and alcohol and mercurochrome, methylate, and all these other things from chemists, from sorcerers. All these other sorceries. And wine disinfects, kills all the germs. What does oil do? You read in Isaiah, it mollifies a wound. Let's see if I can find the scripture here. I won't have time to read that. In Isaiah 1, verse 6, ointment mollifies a wound. It keeps it soft. It doesn't make it hard like it does when you put alcohol on it and kill it. But oil mollifies, keeps it soft, where it just naturally weaves itself back together. And your skin goes right back together. And in the majority of cases, you will never even see a scar. In the majority of cases, if you use wine and oil and bind it up with a cloth, you will never see a scar. You don't believe it? You try it. I've tried it. Well, there's just one example. We have other examples. We have examples in Ezekiel, I think it's chapter 18, about a little baby. When they're born, they rub them with salt. Well, we bathe them in oil. That's just the opposite. They rub them in salt to make their skin tough in texture. We put oil on them and mollifies, makes it real soft and dainty. We like a little dainty, delicate baby. They like one that could stand the weather when they'd have to travel, one that was healthier. So you read there and see what they did. They swaddled the baby, they rubbed him with salt. Proverbs 20, verse 30, you read that blueness comes before healing. And when you get a little blue circle around a wound, that doesn't mean you're getting blood poison at all. That means that the healing is beginning to take place, not according to me, according to Proverbs 20:30, according to Solomon, not to me. Now, I don't need to Mark 5, verse 26, about the woman that suffered many things with many physicians. Finally, when she spent everything she had, what'd she do? Well, she did the same thing people we get letters from did. They thought, well, now, maybe they could get something down here at Mr. Allen's tent meeting. So they went down there. They didn't get anything. Well, then they thought maybe a doctor could help them. So they went over there, and they didn't get anything. And finally, when they were all out of money and didn't have anything left, they finally wrote in a letter and said, say, Mr. Armstrong, I've tried everything else. I might as well just give this a shot and a try. Well, they found the same thing this woman did when she tried Christ finally. But why do we have to be so thick-headed and so hard-headed? Why don't you go out and spend $5 for a little old jar of pills when all you've got to do is come to the minister? It doesn't cost you a thing. We don't charge a thing because it isn't for sale. Now, if you try to pay us to do it, we won't even do it. You couldn't pay us big enough to have us do it. But you'll go out and you'll buy these pills or that pills or this neutralizer or that neutralizer. You'll go here to this tent or that tent. You're endangering yourself with demons when you get involved in a lot of these Pentecostal meetings. Why are we so thick-headed as Israelites? Hasn't our head been softened up a little bit? It really should be. We don't have to learn like this woman. Spent all she had on many physicians. She sought the specialist. And after she'd spent every cent she had, then she came to the great physician. She was healed. And you know, one thing that's provoked me and stirred me more than anything in reading and studying this subject for healing, all the commentaries, all the religious commentaries about Exodus, about these different healing subjects. They say the waters in the Jordan had a certain alkaline nature and salty nature that if a man with leprosy dipped in the water itself had some mysterious healing power. Now that's really something. That's what healed Naaman, you know, when he went and dipped in the river 7 times. Of course, if it's the water that does the healing, why dip 7 times? If it's the water that does the healing, why didn't you find people all ganged up there like they were in John 5? Never read a word about it, do you? But you know, people follow that. And you know, even after these miracles of Christ, kings that laughed and said, well, he wasn't anybody, he was just a man. They denied that he was a God. And yet when he left, when he was crucified and killed, these same men would find blind. Some of their own company would go blind, and they'd go out and they'd get a certain clay. And they thought this clay, if you spit in it, now the older man there, the oldest man should spit in it because there's something about his saliva that made it extra special. And then they'd apply that to the blind eyes. They thought that would heal because that's what Christ did, you know. He used a little spittle and dirt, mixed it, and put it on a blind man's eyes, didn't he? And he was healed. And so what do these men do? They try to practice sorcery. They don't get the fact that God heals miraculously. All those men don't even know what divine healing is. This Dr. McCoy, in all of his cases of healing, he's never seen one case of divine healing. I was startled until some of the people in some of the churches said, well, I've never seen any miracle. I've never seen a miraculous healing. They too thought, well, maybe there was something to this, that your body naturally does it, and you help by the diet. Now, that's a lot of nonsense. We had a man in the church in Eugene that had a big rupture here. He let you feel it. He said, feel that rupture there, just a great big bulge and knot there. And he was anointed, and on his way home, he always fidgeted with it, and on his way home, he just reached down there, and it was gone. Now, you know, if we were Pharisees, we'd start looking around in the car or in the church and say, well, where did it go? That's what they did when Christ healed. And you know, the man that was made blind, what did these scribes and Pharisees say? They came up to him and said, how did he do it? How did he do it? What did he do? There must be something there. If we only had that, boy, we could sure sell that. We could really make money with that. How did he do it? Well, he used a little spittle and clay, so they did that ever since. You know, that's one of the supposed ways of healing blindness even now in those lands of Arabia and over there. What kind of nonsense? It just testifies that the Bible's true. Well, I hope we know that God's the healer, no one else. I want to read now, in closing, the same thing we started out with. Testimony to the world about a healer, and you better watch yourself if you have this idea. If you've ever had this idea, or if you even lean in the slightest way to this, you better listen. You can read this same thing yourself if you just go out to the library and get a Dowey version of the Bible. Turn to Ecclesiasticus 38 and you'll read it. Honor the physician for the need you have of him. For the Most High has created the physician. For all healing is from God. Oh, yes, they all believe in divine healing. And he shall receive gifts of the king. Any gifts you give to someone that heals you, they should be given to God. The skill of the physician, that's what lifts up his head. And in the sight of great men, the physician shall be praised. The Most High has created medicines out of the earth. That's a lie. He created natural herbs and barks and things on the earth, but he didn't give you the right to practice sorcery and split them up and divide them and mix a little of this with a little of that. You're creating yourself, you do that. You're getting involved in sorcery. He's created medicines out of the earth, and the wise man will not abhor them now, all you radicals. Well, I'm radical too then, because I abhor them, because God didn't create them that way. Was not bitter water made sweet with wood? No, it wasn't, was it? You think it was a tree that they threw in there that made that water sweet in Exodus? You think the tree did it in Exodus 15? You think the Jordan washed away Naaman's leprosy? You think it was that clay that Christ put on the blind man's eyes that healed him? What about the other blind man that he didn't use clay with? What about the other people he raised from the dead? Some people he touched, some he didn't touch. Some he used clay on, some he didn't. Some he healed by the leprosy of dipping them in the water, some he didn't. What healed? All right, now notice, wasn't it the bitter water made sweet with the wood? The virtue of these things is come to the knowledge of men. And the Most High has given knowledge to men, that he may be honored in his wonders. By these he shall cure and shall allay their pains. And of these the apothecary shall make sweet confections, and shall make up ointments of health. And of his works there shall be no end. For the peace of God is over all the face of the earth. My son, in your sickness, neglect not yourself, pray to the Lord. Oh yes, they believe in divine healing. You've got to pray. And he'll heal you, but how? How does he do it? Turn away from sin. Yes, you have to repent of whatever you did. Of course, they don't tell you what, did they? Turn away from sin and order your hands aright, and cleanse your heart from all offense. Give a sweet savor and a memorial of fine flour. Make a fat offering, then give place to the physician. Then you do your penance and repeat your beads so many times. Make a fat offering, offer these things, then give place to the devil, to the sorcerer, to the physician. For the Lord created him, and let him not depart from you, for his works are necessary. For there is a time when you must fall into their hands, and they shall beseech the Lord that he would prosper what they give you for ease and remedy for their conduct. He that sins in the sight of his Maker shall fall into the hands of the physician. That's so much wise, and that's exactly where our modern idea of healing came from. A lot of us, we've wavered. The Bible says they'll deceive all but the elect. So that means about half of you or more right here won't be here. And half of you is going to be because you're going to forget a lot of these things. You're going to take them lightly, or you're going to say, well, I still think some medicines are all right. You get one little tiny law in your mind, you break the laws of unclean meat. About certain. And what's the answer? And if a person opens the book and reads you these facts, if a person opens the Bible and reads what I read to you, where are you going to find an answer? And you know, the Bible says that unless the time was shortened, they would deceive even the very elect.
Okay, brethren, and that's the entirety of that sermon from Dean Blackwell. And we began that last Friday night with the Bible study. Then we continued it we just played about 5 minutes in the Bible study last week. And then in the Sabbath service last week, we played a little more than an hour of it. And then tonight we finished off the last 45 minutes. So, what do you think? And do you understand why God's end-time apostle, the head of the church, our pastor general of the church, physically, in a physical sense, gave us a doctrine where he said, brethren, if you trust God, trust God. I mean, sweet and simple. Not a whole lot of words more were needed. But then he said, on the other hand, which on the other hand means, on the other side of the street, I mean, it means totally different. If you put your trust in doctors for healing, then, and this is the doctrine for the church, then you better do everything those doctors tell you to do. And that doctrine simply does it not emphasize what Christ was teaching. When he said, hey, you want to be healed? According to your faith, you got it. But that's a big condition. That's a big IF. If you got faith, you got it. Remember that one man that cried out to God, well, hey, wait a minute. Because Christ had just told him, according to your faith, your son will be healed. The man had come to Christ to ask Christ to heal his son. And so Christ said, okay, Dad, according to your faith, the dad's faith, your son will be healed. The dad said, well, wait a second. I may have some doubt here as soon as I don't see you no more. That I doubt you're going to do this for me. Help my unbelief. Help my doubts. Help me overcome my doubts. The man was he not smart to ask Christ to help where he knew he would have doubts? Well, I believe you're a man of many miracles, and I have doubt, so how about helping my doubt? So, brethren, if we have a need, we can ask God for it. And if you're in a very serious situation, there is a benefit to humbling yourself before God, where God knows you're not coming to him and treating God like your servant. I mean, like you're the master, and God's got to do what I tell him to do. It's not quite that way. We petition God. That means you make a request. You ask God. And if there's a trial you're in, what you're doing with that trial oftentimes, is it not? You're asking God, will you help me with this? And, hey, I'm down here. Hey, I'm having a problem. Please help. Will you please help me? And, yes, you can get his attention much more with fasting. I've used that many a time. I've been in trouble many a time. And God has pulled me out of every single one of them. And, as long as we're in this flesh, we are subject to that devil who, as we get closer to Christ's returns, brethren, think it through. Is he not pulling out all stops? Is there not a verse in Revelation that just before God mentions how he's going to provide travel for those who are counted worthy to escape? Let's get the context of where we're talking. Let's put Luke 21:36 on the screen. I've got it on the screen for you now if you want to look it up in your own Bible. It's a good verse to circle, to have noted in the margin right in the front of your Bible. Hey, go look at Luke 21:36 today. See if I'm doing the top 2 spiritual goals. Okay, I asked you at the beginning to answer the question, I ask you if you could answer the question, what should be our number 1 spiritual goal? And that's number 1 I'm asking about. What should be our number 1, number uno, first, foremost? What should be our first and foremost spiritual goal? I mentioned to you how Mr. Armstrong told me privately, and when I asked him a certain question, he said, yeah, Stephen, your top 2 spiritual goals should be number 1, blah, 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 and number 2, which he started with, by the way, your number 2 spiritual goal you should want to be accounted worthy to escape the Great Tribulation. And as it's worded here in Luke 21:36, I recognize he was citing this verse, because where it says to be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, that's in the chapter where Christ had been explaining the seals of Revelation. Seal number 5 is the Great Tribulation. And Christ was saying, if you will watch the first 4 seals that are the only active seals, they were active even in Christ's time. They're progressive, though, and they've become much more frequent, and they have much greater impact now than they did at Christ's time. Because progressively, they've grown more frequent, they've grown greater in impact. But we haven't gotten past the first 4 seals. They are the only ones that are active. Seal number 5, even though it's open to our understanding to know what it is, seal number 5 has not yet commenced. Because seal number 5, the Great Tribulation, it's referenced by Christ in Matthew 24 and verse 21 and verse 22. Let's pause for a moment and turn over there, either in your own Bible, or you can wait for me to punch it up here on the screen. Chapter 24 of Matthew, and in chapter 24 of Matthew, we're going to verse 21, maybe also verse 22. We'll back up in a moment to verse 20. For then, when? We're talking about the time of this great tribulation. For then shall be great tribulation, and Christ defines what that's like. He says it's a time of trouble such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, coming just ahead of us. And then once it does come, he finishes this verse by saying, no, nor ever after shall be. So the time that's coming will be the worst time of trouble since the beginning of the world to this time, and nothing ever after it again will be as bad. Thank God. It'll be a time of great trouble Tribulation is another word for trouble. And it'll be the greatest time of trouble, the greatest time of tribulation since the beginning of the world. So that's to get the idea what it's like. Verse 20 tells us we should pray that our flight, that escape flight, be not in the winter. Winter's past, we're in the summer, so I can say, well, I don't have to pray this now. Well, what about the rest of the verse? It says, pray that your flight be not in or on the Sabbath day. It's twofold. Pray this nor that. Not in the winter, not on the Sabbath. Well, now that the winter's not here, we still have Sabbath every week, so should we not be praying through the week that, hey, Father, if you're going to have us escape this week, let it not be on the Sabbath. Let it be before the week ends, or let it be next week instead, but not on the Sabbath. Should we not be praying this, brethren, as Christ instructed us to do? And let me see. For some reason, verse 15 is banging the number in my head. Let's see how this also has a future connection. If you look at verse 15, you see that we're told that when we see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, that desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet has 2,300 evening and morning sacraments to it. And, since there's an evening and a morning sacrifice, 2 each day, one in the evening, one in the morning, that means those 2,300 sacrifices consume 1,150 days. They begin at the same time the 1290 begins. The 1290 is the time when the daily sacrifice, the holy sacrifice, is taken away, that Daniel spoke of. I think that's in Daniel chapter 8, verse 11. And brethren, if you've forgotten these very important things, it says, Daniel talks about the wise in the last days will understand. Well, how are you going to understand if you're not reviewing these things on a regular basis? So that's one good thing that's one thing the Sabbath is good for. We refresh ourselves in God's truth and be reminded that all this craziness in the world, we can watch it and pray to God about it and pray for the people hurt and affected by it and pray thy kingdom come to rescue them. And as a result of that watching, we can be accounted worthy to escape. But Daniel 8, verse 11 on your screen. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now, and the timing for this is also explained. Let me see. Daniel 8:11. I think it's going to be in chapter 12. Let's pop over to chapter 12 for a moment of Daniel, of the book of Daniel. And, okay, my button's kind of hung up there for just a moment, but I got them freed up now. Okay, Daniel, oops, I meant to go to 12. Let's go back to the chapters. Daniel chapter 12. I'm just going to take all verses. I forget exactly where it is. We'll just start in 1 until we find it. I'm looking for the 1290 and the 1260. That's mentioned in this chapter. And there's only like 12 or 16 verses, some small number of verses. And here, the question's coming up, how long? And then Daniel's going to answer it in verse... Here's a verse good to take note of, verse 9, that mentions where God tells Daniel, go your way, Daniel, for the words, even all these words you wrote in your book, in the book by your name, Daniel, all these words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. And then many shall be purified. But the wise, here's important to notice at the very end of verse 10, but the wise shall understand. The wicked will not during these latter days. But the wise, and you can be part of the wise, you can understand. Verse 11, from the time, here we are. Here's where you find the 1290. Daniel 12, verse 11. From the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away. Now, what's daily sacrifice is that? Well, it has not yet been reinstituted, but it'll be the daily sacrifice in Jerusalem, in Israel, the modern little nation state of Israel today. And you know, if some of you wonder, well, why is it important that we pray for Judah, who possesses this land of Jerusalem today? And they were God's people. They kept his Sabbath. So there's a sign upon them that they are his people. Now, the other 10 tribes became lost, but we know where they are today. We've discovered them. God revealed them through his end-time apostle. And others understood, but God made it clear through his apostle that, yeah, this is the truth of the Bible, and it relates. And we can know who's who today. Reuben, France; United States; Manasseh, Ephraim, United Kingdom. But we'll know the daily sacrifice when it's reinstated, and then we see it stopped and taken away, and then in its place, these 2,300 abominable evening and morning sacrifices commenced. And from that time, they'll run for 1,150 days. There'll be 2,300 of them, 2 per day, 1 in the evening, 1 in the morning, every day for 1,150 days, for a total of 2,300 sacrifices, abominable sacrifices. And then 140 days before Jesus Christ returns, they'll stop those abominable sacrifices so that the sanctuary can be cleansed for Christ's return. Now, the temple that Christ is returning to is a spiritual temple, a holy temple, the same temple that is also known as the body of Christ, which is also known as the Church of God. And brethren, we're out of time. We did start on time tonight, and we'll continue with what I was mentioning in the Sabbath service in the morning. And that'll commence at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, right here. We'll be live streaming right on our own website, on our homepage, in the first window just below the banner at cogtv.org. That stands for Church of God Television. That's the acronym for Church of God Television, COGTV. It's an org website, .org, cogtv.org. You can get to it by typing sabbath.tv. And then just look in that first window below the banner, and when we're live streaming, boom, our signal is there. You may have to press an audio button depending on what browser you're using, a little speaker icon that lets your audio come through. Or you can watch, as some of you are, either on, we TriCast on our homepage and on Facebook Live and on YouTube Live, all at the same time. So if you ever don't find us on social media, come on over to our website, cogtv.org, and see if we're streaming live in that window there. That'll just simply tell you that somehow, for some reason, we didn't make it on social media, but we have more control over our webpage ourselves, so we'll be there if we ever get cut off on some social media site. But we'll be here at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 9:30 Central. That's 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon in the United Kingdom. That's 4:30 in Israel, 5:30 in other parts of the Middle East. And, brethren, so you're invited to join us, and I hope you will, in the morning. 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, Sabbath service. We'll start with some songs of praise to God from the Purple Hymnal, the song hymnal written by God's end-time apostles, Brother Dwight Armstrong. And remember now, let me sign us off. I'll remind you again in the morning to be praying for the brother of Walter Little, has that mass in his lung, one of his lungs, and 2 fellows in California, the epileptic seizures that Jacob Host has been having. Please pray God heal those for him. And then in the morning, I'll mention to you a need for one of our sisters in Florida. Well, I'll just go ahead and mention now. She's being threatened by her landlord that he may sell the house and she'll have to quickly move. So place quarters for her. You can be praying about that. She'll appreciate that. That is, and she's said I can mention her name, so I'll tell you. That is Karen Xavier, spelled Xavier. Karen Xavier. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Karen. Let me know if I mispronounced that. And then, brethren, if any other of you have prayer needs, we'll try to catch those again next Friday night. And remember, as Mr. Blackwell was pointing out, Jesus Christ instructing us and inspire the words of James in chapter 5, starting in verse 14. If any sick among you, to call for the elders of the church. And his prayer of faith and the anointing. So show your trust and faith in God and watch God heal you. All right, brother, thanks for joining me tonight. And I hope you have a good night's sleep. And again, you're invited to join us in the morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying good night and I wish you a very happy Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom.